Okay, yesterday we left off. Basically, we finished, but let's just chazariba. Rabbi Elazar said, "Mizbeach that was nifkam, you cannot eat kachik kedashim." And he brought a pasuk from Shiori Mincha. So he brought. Actually said you can't eat a Shiori Mincha. The Gemara asked, and other kachim you could eat, and the Gemara says no. Kachim kedashim you have a gezer shava to mincha. So just like the mincha, the pasuk says you can't eat eitzel mizbeach. What does eitzel mizbeach mean? It can't mean next to the mizbeach because you can eat kachik kedashim the halazara. It means when the mizbeach is shaling. And he has a gezer shava to kachik kedashim. Kachim kalim minalon. How do you know kachim kalim? So that week was a little much more intricate. We had Rabbi Yossi said in the Zevachim of Rabbi Ishmael. We just want to say good Shabbos to my son. So that was a little more intricate how to get to it. It said that Meiser Bisman Hazeh, could you eat Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim? And we said you can't. Why? Because you're going to learn that from Bechor. Bechor you can't eat, and make a hekesh from Meiser Sheni to Bechor. How do you know Bechor you can't eat? If you hold that Kedusha Rishona Kitcha Lasadavai, meaning that the Kedusha based on Migdash is Kaddish, then you can go ahead, right, and bring the carbon, because you don't even need the Mizbeach, according to that opinion. And if you hold Kedusha Rishona Kitcha L'Shaita V'Loi Kitcha Lasadavai, right, then you should have the same Shaila by Bechar. Can you eat by Bechar? And we said it's speaking where you brought the carbon already, you did this Rika, but you didn't have a chance to eat it till the base of English was destroyed. Would you be able to eat it? And we made a hekesh between dam. We made a hekesh between dam and basar. So just like dam, the only time you can sprinkle the dam is in the mizbeach there. So too, the only time you can eat basar was the mizbeach is there. We had a kasha. So David Alon made hekesh bechor from dam. How could you go ahead and learn to bechor maisa? We said two pshat that maisa is either is Maisa, the thing that you learn out is Chulin, or like the Mandim and Melamed, that Basar will view Basar and Dama as the same thing. I just found interesting. Rashi says that Kedusha Rishon Kitchel Shaita is going on Eretz Yisrael. In other words, since Eretz Yisrael was Kaddish, since Eretz Yisrael was Kaddish, and you had Maisa, but the Beis Hamikdash was not Kaddish. That Kedusha was not Kitchel Asad Lavai. That's Rashi seems to say. Again, Eretz Yisrael was Kaddish. Eretz Yisrael was Kaddish, but the Beis Hamikdash was not. Just share with you a Rambam, fellas. The Rambam, the Rambam is in Vav from Hilchas Beis Bechira. The Rambam is in Vav from Hilchas Beis Bechira, Halachi Adalit. So Kol Makom. I'm getting a little feedback over here. This Rambam is Vav Bechira. He holds the exact opposite of Rashi. Kol Makom Shloi Nasa B'chol Elu. This is describing the ways that you make it kodesh with the shiri mincha, with toida. You walk around, okay. But we're not getting into that now. Ukaseda said ein kodesh gomor. It's not totally kodesh. She'asa Ezra shtei toidos. That he made two toidos if it's not kodesh. Sichron hu she'asa loy b'maisa. It's only a mizikarin. And the loy b'maisa of niskadesh hamakom shloi hoyisham loy melech loy yom v'tumim u'v'manis katsha. How could it become kodesh? B'kedusha rishayna shekitcha shleima shu kiddush ha'azara v'Yushalayim l'shaita v'kiddush l'asad lavai. Lefikach makrivin hakabonas kulon. You could bring karbonas af api she'ein shambayis banoi, because he has of the opinion that kedusha rishayna kitcha l'shaita is going on the Beis Hamikdash. Even though it's destroyed. And there's no mechitzas surrounding it. And you'll be able to eat kachim kalim ma'aser sheni b'chol Yerushalayim. Why? Because it's Kaddish. Afa pish ein sham chaymais. Shekdush rishayna kitchel shaita v'kitchel lasa lavai. So it comes out like the Rambam. The Rambam holds kitchel rishayna shekitchel shlomo shekiddush azor rishlayim v'shaita v'kitchel lasa lavai. That's going on the Beis Hamikdash, not on Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam's of the opinion Eretz Yisrael is not Kaddish. The exact opposite of Rashi. Rashi says Eretz Yisrael is Mechuyev in Maisa and Truma, and he says not. However, regarding the Beis Hamikdash, Rashi says no, he says yes. Look at the lashon of the Ravid guys. B'kedusha Rishayna Shekitcha Shlomo, Am Avram, Svaras Atzmehizu, Lo Yildati Me'ein Loi. Says the Ravid, this is the Rambam's own svara. He has no idea where he got it from. You can imagine the amount of Torah that's said on this Rambam. That again, I just found it fascinating. You should be aware. Again, that's in Vav Yedalid in Hilchos Beis Bechira, the opposite of Rashi. Rashi says that Eretz Yisrael is Kodesh, the Beis Hamikdash not. The Rambam says Beis Hamikdash yeah, Eretz Yisrael not. Okay. Comes out from yesterday's shir is that Ma'aser Sheni, you have a hekesh to bechor and you can't eat. Why? And therefore we learn from Kotchem Kalim that Kotchem Kalim, when the Mizbeach is not there, you can't eat it. Not only Kotchem Kedoshim, but even Kotchem Kalim. That's what we concluded yesterday. The Shaila was exactly in the limud, exactly how the limud work, hekesh mehekesh, but we learned out if the Mizbeach is nifkam, if the Mizbeach is what is begam, you would not be able to eat Ma'aser Sheni. Well, excuse me, you won't be able to eat Kotchem Kalim. You won't be able to eat Bechar. Now, we're going to question that. So we're going to start from Nun Samech Hamid Beis, Kisolik 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up. 9 lines up on Samech Hamid Beis. Kisolik Ravin, when Ravin came up from Eretz Yisrael, I guess when he came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he went down to Eretz Yisrael. Usually Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael and said things in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Here we have his return trip, where he's going back to Eretz Yisrael, and he meets the famous Rabbi Yirmiyah. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, who was a little caustic at times when it came to Bnei Bavel, said the following: Amar, Bavloi Tipshoi, the Babylonians are foolish. I'm told the Yasrei Ba'arech Hashucha, they live in a dark land. They say things that are dark. In other words, he's disagreeing with Abaya. He's disagreeing that Kotchem Kalim, when there's no Mizbeach, that you can't eat it. He's disagreeing with that. So again, look at Rashi. L'shmaitza, right before it gets white. Hoda Abaya, Dama Kotchem Kalim Nifsolim, Bekimis HaMizbeach, U'maisle Midrash Rabbi Yossi, that is incorrect. You know, Rashi's putting you back on course. We had this digression to go ahead and explain. So what Rashi does is he puts you back on course. So this question, that statement, that when the Beis Hamikdash is nifkam, that the Kotchem Kalim you cannot eat, right? That is not correct. Abaye said it. He's living in dark Bavel. He's saying dark things, and therefore it's not correct. And here's his proof. Okay. Leishmilahu hadetanya. B'shas silik masois, when they would go ahead and they would take down the Mishkan and they would remove the Mizbeach when they would travel, b'sak silik masois, kotchim nifsalim, the kotchim, it's asa to eat kotchim, b'zovim mitzurayim mishtalchim chutz mechitza, and the zovim and the mitzurayim that had to be sent out, the zovim from Machna Leviah and mitzurayim from Afilu Machna Yisrael, that was still intact. You might think that since it's down, they can go back. No, there is some type of traveling machana that the Zov and the Mitzuroyim would have to be sent out. So on one hand, it's a shtickle counterintuitive. On one hand, you're telling me they can't eat kachim. And the other, you're saying that what? Well, it's still intact because they have to be sent out of the machna, right? They have to be sent out of the machna. V'tanya idach, b'shnei mekoymos, kachim nechalin. In 2 places, kachim is eaten. Now, mashma, 2 places kachim is eaten. Let's see Rashi. Shnei mekoymos nechalin. Chad bimkomom b'machnos amuris behen, kishamishkan bimkaimai. It can be eaten where what? When it is intact. V'chad b'chomakam sheishon derech alichasan mishenasu v'koshen adadi. So, fellas, we see that when they're traveling, there seems to be a din of machne. We're sending out the Zav and Mitzrayim. You're traveling, but we're sending them away. So, in other words, you could eat kachim at that time. So, one, there's two places you can eat kachim. One, when the Mishkan is standing, and two, when the Mishkan is not standing. So, what does that mean? If you can eat in both places, what does it mean? So, here's the way Rabbi Yomi attached it. Ha b'kachim kedashim. When the Mizbeach is standing in its place and the Machne is in its place, then you could eat kachim kedashim. When it's traveling, what could you eat? Kachim kalim. Is doch a raya that even though the Mizbeach is not in its place, you're able to eat kachim kalim, and that was Rav Yemi's tain on Abaya, who wanted to say, again, we're zustelling the nifkam, the Mizbeach being pogum, to Mizbeach traveling, not being in its place, because it's walking around. So Rashi says, my love, Kamaisa, that you could, the first place we're speaking that you could eat is B'kachim Kedoshim. That's when the Mishkan is intact. V'habekachim Kalam, and when it's traveling, then you can go ahead and eat Kachim Kalam. And that's the kasha he asked his not kasha. That was his conflicting opinion to Abaya, that you could eat Kachim Kalam. Again, and the tzushtel is Nifkam Mizbeach, you don't have Mizbeach. You're traveling, you don't have Mizbeach. The Mizbeach is traveling, Memeluat, you don't have that place. That was his taina. Says the Gemara, you really emiswat, you don't have a riot to that. Says the Maya, I can learn a different way. Ravina, Idi Kachim Kalim. The places we're speaking about we're speaking about is Kachim Kedoshim. Did I say Kachim Kalim? Idi is speaking about what? Kachim Kalim. Right, they're both speaking about Kachim Kalim. In other words, there's a place where you could eat Kachim Kalim, and there's a place when you could eat Kachim Kalim. What's the Lake Kasha? The Brisa Rishona that said that you can eat. The Brisa Rishona that you said you can't eat is Rabbi Shmuel, who makes the hekesh between basar and dam. Since you can't sprinkle dam, you can't eat the basar. And for her, the latter Brisa that says Shnei Mekoimus you could eat. So in other words, we're learning shot in the Brisa, not going back on Shnei Mekoimus. The first Brisa that said you can't eat, where it says Nifsalim, guys, Tanya. B'shas Silik Masois Kachim Nifsalim is going on Kachim Kalam. Who's that according to? That's like Abaya said. That's Rabbi Shmuel who made the hekesh between basar and dam. Good. So since there's no mizbeach and you can't sprinkle the dam, memela you can't eat bechar, which is kachim kalam. The second one that said you could eat, that's according to the Chachamim, who apparently argue on Rabbi Shmuel. So that's another way. But einachinami, it's not pshat that carte blanche across the board. You could eat kachim kalam, and memela Abaya is not living. He may live in a dark place, but he's not saying dark things because einachinami. There's an opinion that's intact about Rabbi Shmuel that you cannot eat kachim kalam in the mizbeach is not in its place, where it's pogum. I can answer up the brises. Ha b'kachim kedoshim. Right? It's speaking about what? It's speaking about the two brises. It's speaking about kachim kedoshim. Right? When the brisa says the second brisa that you could eat shnei mekoimos is koidim she'amidu levim es hamishkan. Right? It's when the mishkan. Rashi says lav davka. Means when the Mishkan is standing, you could eat. And after they took down the Mishkan, in other words, it's speaking that they took down the curtains and the Mizbeach is still there. So you could eat over there. So guys, you're telling me two chidushim. One, you could eat when it's normal. Secondly, when they began to take it down and the Mizbeach was still in place, you could also eat. What's the chiddush? What's the Mizbeach's there? So Ma'od the Tema. If Salah b'yotza, I might think that since there is no kloyim, we have the psul of yotza, that the meat is outside the boundary, you had to eat kachim kedoshim. You had to eat it where? Inside the kloyim. So you had to eat it inside the kloyim. If you took it outside the kloyim, you would have what? A psul yotza. And now, so Kamash Malon, once the kloyim are down, there's no psul yotza anymore. Some other time is Lubi Yaitza, Kamash Malon, right? Kamash Malon not. Good. Question. So you hear this, the Mizbeach is in place and you could eat. The Havamina is why couldn't you eat? It's Psul Yaitza. Why is it only a Havamina? It makes sense, this guys, there's a Psul Yaitza. There's no, you're out, there is no curtains. You're outside, right? You're not inside the curtains. There are no curtains. So Feg Gemara, Ve'ema Hachinami, let's say Einachinami. So Al Makra, the Pasuk says, V'nasa oil moyed. The pasuk says, "V'nasa oil moyed machna leviyim." When it says "V'nasa oil moyed," afal pishenasa, even though it's traveling, oil moyed. Who, even though it's traveling, it's oil moyed, and it's not but the kedusha of the Mishkan, and therefore there's no psul yaitza. Mela comes out that the time of Rav Yirmiyah is really bad. I can learn up the Bryce's different way, and therefore you're not subject to saying that there's no dinner kachim kalam. Enochinami could be yes, could be not, but again, I have a way. If the Bryce that says you can't eat is Rabbi Shmuel, that works out. The Bryce that says you could eat is Rabbanon, and Abaye said is din according to Rabbi Shmuel. Then there's another opinion. It's kachim kadashim. One is the Mishkan standing. One the walls are down. The Chiddush, even though the walls are down, V'nasa oil moed, it's still called oil moed. Once it's called oil moed, you could eat kachim kadashim by oil moed. Okay, the Gemara now is going to digress to just discuss the Mizbeach a little bit. Okay, to understand this Gemara, there were different times in history where the Mishkan was. We've discussed it quite a few times. In the Midbar, of course, every carbon had to come to the Mishkan. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, during the 7 years of capturing and the 7 years of dividing Eretz Yisrael, during those 14 years, the Mishkan was in a place called Gilgal. During Mishkan Gilgal, Bamas were permitted. Private Mizbechas were permitted to bring in Nedarim v'Nedavos. You couldn't bring other karbanos there. The Chatas you had to bring to the Mishkan, Ashram you had to bring to the Mishkan, but an Oila or a Shlamim you could put on a Bama. That's during Mishkan. After Gilgal, they came to Mishkan Shiloh, which existed for 369 years, till the destruction by the Pelishtim. That was the day the Pelishtim stole the Aron. Eli heard about it, and he died, as we're told in Shmuel Aleph. During those 369 years, the Mishkan Shiloh had walls. It didn't have curtains, it had walls, and was covered with the covering of the Mishkan. It was covered with the Izim and the Yiras Mishkan, the Yiras Izim, that covered the top of it. But during that 369 years, Bamas were not permitted. Upon the destruction of Shiloh, the Mishkan came to Nov. And it was Nov for 13 years. It was a Nov for 13 years. Be aware there was no Aron there in Nov. It was not there. And then for the next 44 years, it came to Givon. We met Givon yesterday, right? That's where Shlomo brought his 1,000 karbanos. During that time, Bamas were permitted. And then it came to the Beis Elamim, it came to the Beis HaMikdash, and from then on, Bamas were not permitted. So that's the different kufa. Now, during Mishkan Gilgal, the Mizbeach Nechoshes with Moshe Rabbeinu was used. And the Shiloh is by Shiloh, what exactly was used? Was it the Mizbeach Avonim, or did they use the Mizbeach of Nechoshes? Good. So says the Gemara. Let's see inside. Says the Gemara. Where's this Psukim, the Avonim? Amar Rav Huna. Amar Rav. Says Rav Huna in the name of Rav, Mizbeach shel Shiloh, the Mizbeach of Shiloh, the Mizbeach the Mizbeach shel Shiloh, the Mizbeach that wasn't in Shiloh, shel Avonim Paya. It was made out of stone. The Tanya, Reb Lezman Yaakov Omer, Ma Tamid Loimar. It says 3 times in the Torah in different places. It says Avonim, Avonim, Avonim. Rashi briefly, tells you the psukim. He doesn't give you the whole pasuk. So let's see Rashi just for a second. He says that it says in Mizbeach Avonim. It says Mizbeach Avonim Leisanif, and it says Avonim Shleimos Tibana. So it says Avonim by 3 different places. What are the 3 different places? Echad shel Shiloh. You want to tell me that the Mishkan of Shiloh had Avonim? The Echad shel Noi v'Givoin. And thirdly, Beis Elamim. That these in the Mizbeach Nechoshes was not used, but the Mizbeach was made of Avonim. Masiv Rav Acha bar Ami, Eish Yarda min Shemayim, b'nei Moshe. When Moshe built the Mishkan, an Eish came down from Shemayim, and that Eish was there all the time. That's the ner tamid. That's the eish was there all the time. When the stalkel me'al mizbeach and chayches, it only left the mizbeach and chayches. Ela b'mei shloimei. Only b'mei shloimei. In other words, it was there during Mishkan Shiloi. It was there during Mishkan No Givon. It only left b'mei shlomo. The eish yarda b'mei shlomo lo nistalka at shabai Menashe. And the eish that came down b'mei shlomo to consume the kabbanis, that left when Menashe Harasha took it away. The silka. The im isa, and if you're going to tell me that the Mizbeach of Shilei was Mizbeach of Avonim, Mei Karuhu distalically. Earlier than Shlomo, during the in other words, when the Mizbeach and the Chayshes, I understand it was there. But Mizbeach Avonim, the assumption right now is that it wasn't there at all. Right? Rashi says, Vim Isa Mei Karuhu dem Istalik, Mishahukim Mishkan B'Shilei, Ubonim Mizbeach Avonim, that being the key, building Mizbeach of Avonim, Chuskaku Listalik Mizbeach Shal Chayshes. They had to take it off the Mizbeach and the Chayshes and put it on there. So how can you tell me it was burning on, guys, you're telling me it was burning on Mizbeach and the Chayshes all the time, right? L'chayra, they had to take it and put it on the Shilai. They had to take it and put it on Shilai. Says Gemara, so that's the Kasha, the Huna. So, and the Gemara, Rabbi Huna, Hu Da'amak Reb Nasan. He holds like Reb Nasan. And Reb Nasan said, guys, that the fire did leave the Mizbeach and the Chayshes. The Tanya, Reb Nasan, Reb Nasan says, Mizbeach Shashila Shal Nechayshes Haya, Chalol, Umali Avonim. The Mizbeach of Shiloh is Nechayshes. It was hollow, and they filled it not with earth, they filled it with stones. And therefore, and the Eish, in fact, left Moshe Mizbeach. They filled it with stones, but it was Mizbeach Nechayshes. It left Moshe's guys. So it left Moshe's Mizbeach Nechayshes, and it went to Shiloh. So Rav Hunas, who said this, held like what Reb Nasan. Rashi, Rav Huna Dama Reb Nasan, v'hadalei Aminun Hu Dama Reb Elazar ben Yaakov. He could have said like Reb Elazar ben Yaakov, because Reb Elazar ben Yaakov said it was Avonim also. So why didn't Rashi says, why didn't he hold like Reb Elazar ben Yaakov? Mishnah Reb Nasan Hu de Shamil le behedya, because Reb Nasan says openly that it was made of stone. Shahayak. Avam Reb Elazar ben Yaakov lo Shamil le el dehuchshe b'shal Avonim. He didn't say it left. He says that it was made of stone, but it doesn't say that it left. It's mashma from Nachman more that it left. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Omar, from Nasan, not Nachman. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Omar, my line is stalka. When it says it never left Moshe's, it does not mean line is stalka levatala. It never left for any other reason. It was there, but it left to ignite the fire on the other mizbechos. Mahi Rabbanonami Shaviva Havi Mishadra, that it was a fire would come, a wind would come, and it would blow the fire from Moshe's Nechayshes onto the other Mizbechos. So it doesn't mean it never left. It left. It didn't leave it for no other reason, but it would blow and come back. But it left temporarily and then come back. Papa Amo Shpiza Havi Noket. It was like a Shpiza, Zimnin Hacha, the Zimnin Hacha. Sometimes it was there, and sometimes it was there. Tan Hasa. Kish'ala b'nei Goyla, when b'nei Goyla came up to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, Haysifu alav dalet amis min adarim, dalet amis min hamayriv. So Rashi tells us that the Beis HaMikdash that Shlomo built was only 28 by 28. It was 28 by 28. They came up and they added 4. So 28 and 4 is 62. That's the numbers we've been working with. 62. I say it's 60, 32, excuse me. 32, 28. I was thinking with the kevesh, right? But it was 32. So they added on. They added like kimin gamma. They added on the yisoid. Dalet amis min amariv, dalet amis min adorim, 4 amis from the dorim, dalet amis min amariv. Kimin gamma. My timer, Amar Rav Yosef mishum lo sipek. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough space, so they added more. Amalei Abaya, Hashta, Migdash Rishon, the Chsiv Bey, the Migdash Rishon, where it says there were many people in the Migdash Rishon. The Migdash Rishon, where it says, the Chsiv Bey, Yehuda Yisrael, Rabim Kechol Ashal Sfas Hayom, Sapak, that 28 by 28 was enough for their kabbanis. Migdash Sheni, the Chsiv Bey, Kol HaKahal Ke'echad, Arba Rivoy, there was only like 400,000, like Sapik, it's not enough. Why would they have to add more? If there's less people, you don't have to add more. there's less people, you don't have to add more. Some later, Rabbi Yosef said, Hasam in the Migdash Rishon, Eishel Shemayim Misaitan. The reason why it was enough is because they had external help. You had the Eish coming down from Shemayim to consume the Kabbanis. So you didn't need anything more than 28 by 28. But Hacha and the Migdash Sheni, Ein Eishel Shemayim Misaitan, but the Eish Shemayim, right? Shoshamayim Misaitan. That when it didn't help them, and therefore they needed more space to burn the kabbanis. Kiyasa Ravin, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar, you see the difference. Ki Solik is when he went up from Eretz Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Ki Asa when he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. That's the way to tell the difference. Kiyasa Ravin, Amar, he said in the name of Reb Shimon and Pazi, in the name of Mishim Kapara, in the name of Bar Kapara, the reason why they made the Mizbeach bigger is Shisin Haisifu. They went ahead and when they made it bigger, they added holes. On the southwest side, they made holes in the Keren itself to go ahead and accept the Nisach Hayayin and the Nisach Hamayim. Initially, guys, they would go ahead and pour. They'd be on the side of the Mizbeach. It would go down the side of the Mizbeach. But they had a limud to make holes that it should go through the Mizbeach. And rather than down the sides, they made a limud that it should go what? Through the holes. So that's what it's saying over here. Mishum Bakapari, Shisin I see from Meikara Sava Mizbeach Adama Shu Otam Badama. Initially said in the Mizbeach of Adama that it should be closed up with Adama, so there was no holes in the Mizbeach. It was not, it was full Adama, there was no holes in it. Ulabisoif, and what did they hold? Savar Shisa Ka'achila. The Mizbeach should be drinking like it eats. And therefore, when it ate, fellas, it was consumed totally in the Mizbeach. So when it drank, it should be totally in the Mizbeach. When it drank, it should be totally in Mizbeach. Uma Mizbeach Adama. What did they do with the words Mizbeach Adama? It's mashma that there shouldn't be any holes in it. It should be connected to the ground. You should not build it. You shouldn't build it on arches. No, you should build it on subterranean places. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yosef, Lav Hainu de Tanya. Says Rabbi Yosef, Lav Hainu de Tanya, isn't that what we learned, right? To explain the Bayasheni that they made it bigger. Lav Hainu de Tanya, Vayachinu HaMizbeach HaMechinosav, and they established the Mizbeach on its foundations. That Shegiu, that the Hagdoila, they understood l'soif midaisav. They understood what the nevuah. They were the last of the neviim. That they felt that the mizbeach should be expanded. David HaMelech writes and tells Shlomo, I have the exact calculations of everything. You can't expand it. So how were they able to expand the mizbeach? Ella Amar Rabbi Yosef says Rabbi Yosef. They found the pasuk, Nidash in the pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Vayom David Zehu Bayis Hashem V'zeh Mizbeach L'Oil Yisrael. This is the Bayis of Hashem. This is the Mizbeach L'Oil Yisrael. And made it alimud ki Bayis. Ma Bayis, just like the Bayis Shishim Amma, just like the Bayis was 60 Amma. Af Mizbeach at Shishim Amma. It also should be to what 60 Amma. Okay, it also should be the Shishim Amma. Okay, we'll stop over here.
I have a question. Gemara before, when it said that the case where the Mizbeach was out, but the Mishkan was not there anymore. How is that physically possible? I was under the impression that the Kohanim came in before the Leviim did anything, and they covered all of the Kalim. Wouldn't they have covered the Mizbeach also?
Rashi brings that they first took down the curtains and everything, so it could be before they covered it. In other words, they took down the curtains. The Bnei Gershon Merari did their job before the cost. The last things to go was the Kalim. So it's very easy. They could have, before they had a chance of covering it, or maybe even if they did cover it, it's the Mizbeach is considered in its place if it didn't move yet. I hate to taste it not. Okay, have a good Shabbos.